One of the most expensive mistakes companies make is buying software before they have clarified the process the software is supposed to support. I'm David Singletary from DGS Digital. I help business leaders streamline processes and improve efficiencies by leveraging best-in-class software solutions. And we have Paul. Introduce
Yep.
yourself.
Yeah, I'm Paul Graver from EXSETIS Consulting, and I help organizations improve quality, streamline processes, and turn data into practical results. So, with my 30-year plus years background in manufacturing, I bring a more, direct process analysis approach, which David and I think work hand in hand with what I do and what he does. So yeah, that's who I am.
So I'm just going to share a quick slide here
Yeah.
and go over some of the things we're going to review today. So let's take a look at the slide. So we're going to be talking about why companies get this wrong. Why software becomes the default answer when the workflow is still unclear. We're going to talk about, some use cases that we've seen, some business scenarios that we've seen in our past. We'll talk about process versus software or both, trying to find what the root cause is and what to do before you have these vendor conversations. Things that you should think about, questions that you should ask.
Right.
So Paul, I just want to ask you some questions like, on this topic, what are some of the examples that you found in your past?
Well, what I've seen, where, obviously technology today with AI and all these other things, there's so much good software out there that really can help enhance a process. But, I kind of mirror what you pointed out in the beginning, the mistake people make is thinking the software is the fix. Software enhances the process. And I think the biggest mistake is looking for that quick fix or that easy answer. And what I've seen in my past is, you know, trying to apply software to make the process better, creating more problems or more challenges in that you're sort of jamming a square peg into a round hole because you haven't kind of organized your process well enough. And now you're making the software that's out there fit something that is not quite performing. A really kind of goofy analogy I'll say is going shopping without looking what you have in your house first. I mean, not knowing what you need. You go and you end up buying more stuff than you need, or you miss something that you do need because you haven't analyzed what you do really need first before you go and do the shopping trip. So it's that same kind of a thing: is understanding what your process really needs, and then finding the right software. You're going to do a better purchase. It's going to be more efficient, and you'll have a lot less workarounds if you really know what you're looking for. And I've seen it from both perspectives where they've done the work up front and they've were able to really define the software purchase and then make really good applicable changes. Where I've seen it the other way, where you know they end up having to change their process to fit the software they purchase, which can be very challenging, uncomfortable. It hurts morale. It hurts the timeline because people are uncomfortable with what's happening, as opposed to really enhancing what's happening.
Yeah, and I see that when I'm working with customers, they'll come to me and they want to implement new software, but the first thing I always do is I have to understand what their process is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'll document their process, and through that exercise, there's always a aha moment where,
Oh, for
oh, I
sure.
didn't know we did this,
Yeah.
or I press them on why they're doing that, and a lot of the responses is always, well, we've always done it this way,
Right.
or it could be the software that they're using kind of
Has
forces their
limitations.
hand in that
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah. I mean, when I do process mapping with clients, there's the exercise of what in a perfect world, this is how things should go, point A to point Z, right? This is how we designed our process. And then you almost have to overlay reality. All right, what do you really do? I mean, there's what you're ideally doing, and then what you're really doing. And sometimes there's a miscommunication between, upper management and the people doing the work, because they're finding a workaround due to some, whether it's a something missing in the current software, like you just pointed out, or just other process issues where they have to do a manual workaround, or they have to somehow skip a step or do whatever. So they've modified that ideal process into something that they deal with on a daily basis. And that's really where you start to identify where the pain points are, because you see these manual workarounds, you see these changes that they've made, just to get through the day. And having that conversation up front, like you said, to really identify what the process is. So you have those aha moments, like, oh, what? And the management, I've seen it. We're like, what do you mean you do it that way? Like, well, that's the way we've been doing it. We thought you knew, kind of stuff. And it's
Yeah.
like, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. We're investing all this money in this software, and you're not doing what I think you're doing. So those are conversations that you really have to have, and figure out, because especially now with the software that's available, that they have modular pieces. I mean, you can really, you know build something, and minimize a lot of real customization, using the modules, using different things that best fit your process, um, and get a good result. And I can't stress it enough throughout this whole process is, when you apply something like this, when you do an upgrade to a new software system, that's uncomfortable for a lot of people anyway, because it's a change. Change is scary. We all know that. Um, so if you can get it where the software, where the people who are going to be doing the work now, utilizing the software, doing all that work, they can see it as an enhancement to their day, rather than oh my God, I got to learn all this new stuff, and it's not the way it's used to be, and I'm all uncomfortable. It just makes it painful and difficult. Whereas if you do the work up front and really have that discussion regarding your process and where the blips are and where the gaps are, and then you apply the software accordingly, that transition goes much smoother.
Is there a certain size company that you feel that this is most beneficial for, or does it run the gamut?
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, kind of the small to mid-size companies, like 50 to 250 employee kind of size. Because typically when they're much bigger, they now have more corporate resources and maybe more corporate programs that they're applying. Where if it's a smaller company, you typically have, limited management team. Everyone's wearing multiple hats, and they need a system that's going to help them better. Because they're all, again, wearing multiple hats, getting through the day, getting through the process. If you don't have a good system to feed information to you, so good management summary reports, good KPI, key process indicator documents, ways to track your performance in very repeatable, clean communications. A smaller, more lean management team needs those kind of pieces to help them get get through the business better.
And you mentioned reporting.
Yeah.
How does that come into your process when you're helping a customer? Does that play a factor?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, first you analyze, what are you reporting? Well, what data are you collecting? What are you doing with that data? How are you using that data? How are you making decisions based on that information? And you know, too many times you see tons of data collected, and then you have this huge mess of stuff, and it's overwhelming. You don't know what to take from it. So the reporting features in a lot of this software help break down that. You can build in calculations, you can build in, comparisons, gap analysis, that kind of stuff. And then you come up with your key performance indicators that you can now track all the key things that you're looking for, and have a nice, neat way to see how you're doing compared to yesterday or last month or the previous year, or how you're trending toward your budget targets, or whatever the key things you're watching. It's just like the speedometer on your car. You're constantly tracking how you're doing. and but you have that dashboard, you have that information in front of you that's well organized, predetermined on the key things you're looking at, rather than just a huge dump of data that you're just like your head spins.
Yeah, I think some of the things I run into is either people don't have any reporting at all,
Hmm.
or they're relying on some limited reporting. So some of it's educational on this is how you should look at the data. So let's
Hmm.
say we're putting in a new system, and
Yeah.
now this new system does have this information. Is really train them on these are the key points that you should look at to kind of make the decisions that you need. So,
Right.
for example, I work with a lot of customers that deal with inventory. So,
Hmm.
having reorder points and things of that nature. So now leveraging the software to provide that information so they can make better decisions based upon the data that's
Absolutely.
provided. And a lot of these systems today now can automate a lot of that.
Hmm.
But they still need to understand what's happening because there's ebbs and flows in their cycle. Maybe during the holiday season they need to ramp up
Right.
reordering because of sales and things like that. So just really educating people on these are kind of the ways that you should look at your information because
Hmm.
based on history, like I've implemented 400 plus clients and you learn things along the way
Yeah.
of what works with other people and you're just trying to train them on these are things that have worked in the past. These are things that people are looking for because a lot of times they'll ask, well, what do other people do? And
Sure.
able to provide some of that information.
Yeah. I mean, you made a really good point on, a lot of businesses have cyclical, business cycles, and, ordering patterns, for raw materials, lead time that's built into those. If you have a busy holiday season, like the example you used, when do you have to start prepping for that and getting all your materials lined up so you don't have a hitch in your order, because again, you want to be tracking obviously your order turnaround time. How quickly can you bring an order in, get it out the door, all that kind of stuff. And you don't want to be encumbered by, oh geez, we're out of this, this particular raw material because the lead time, we didn't order it in time. Now we got to wait. Now the orders are backing up, and it snowballs now. Um, but also it gets into cash flow. I mean, your ordering practices. Can you order certain things in bulk at certain times and save money by doing, but so all that stuff can come together, and you can utilize the software to do that kind of analysis. Look at a year's span of your ordering, your timing of your ordering practices. Are you ordering small pieces every month, or could you order it quarterly and save some money? So there's so many things that tie together, not just in process efficiency, but also cash flow. So
So can you maybe give us an example of a real scenario that you've gone through and how you approach that process? Like what would it look like, uh, have a business and we're looking for this type of service of process improvement? Like, can you give us like an example of maybe a realistic uh, example that you have?
yeah. Well, I'll show you. I'll show you a couple. Let me share my screen. I'll show you a couple slides. Just kind of what walk through the process a little bit. Let me find it here. So if you start in this particular example, where is it? Can you see this? All right.
It's still coming
Right.
up. I see your desktop.
Oh, that's weird. All right, let me try something else.
Okay. Yeah, I see it
Oh,
now.
okay, so this is just kind of an example where working with a client. where we're talking about their basic order process. So, I mean, the kind of the process starts by just, this is, getting into a room together, whether it's on a big whiteboard or on a blank wall, and putting up your post-it notes, walking through your process, and really get different people, from different departments talking about their role and everything. And it's a great exercise. Again, you talk about those aha moments where, you're getting people together and saying, well, this is what I do. It's like, I didn't know you did that. And, because they're always typically so focused on their part of it, they don't ever look back at the whole big picture to see how their role interacts with the rest of the roles. And you find areas where, people are doing, reworking products that they didn't realize was happening. And you can get into really identifying wasted time, wasted energy, even wasted footsteps. I mean, if you're talking about like a manufacturing and you're literally carrying stuff from one part of the room to another and how the room is laid out and how the process flows, wasted time, wasted footsteps, wasted effort, wasted materials, all kind of come to light in something like this. But then you can turn this into a more direct flow chart. Let me pull that one up. And you take that same process. Now you've turned it into a flow chart. Let me share that one. So hopefully you can see that okay.
Yep. Let's
Yeah,
see.
so now you've taken that same exercise and you've turned it into an actual flow chart where you're actually now really tracking the process, who's responsible for what, as you talk through it. And now that this is now a tool you can use when you're looking at your software. So, it's not just a random bunch of ideas and thoughts, but you're actually walking through a specific process, looking at all the key decision making, some of these yes no kind of, do we have enough material to manufacture, yes or no, do we need to order, what do we need to do. This is where your inventory management comes into play. And then you get into quality decisions, that impacts your flow process, whether you need to remake it or did you make enough that's meeting the quality spec, that kind of stuff. And then the next key thing that you can do is where actually you're looking at what they call, you turn that now into a swim lane conversation where you are taking that same process flow and now assigning who's responsible for what.
So you typically go through those three different iterations of,
Yeah, so those kind of iterations where you're doing the brainstorming, really kind of working through, getting those aha moments like you mentioned, and now actually really defining the process in a step-by-step, very organized method. And yeah, this is a simplistic version of it. But now you've taken that same process flow and now you've created a lane for each department. You got sales, customer service, operations, purchasing, quality, and shipping in this example, where now each person, you can see what part of the process is their responsibility specifically. And then you get, kind of cross communication going across the different departments. And this is where you can really define some of those data inputs as well, as far as what data you're collecting. Again, this is a very simplistic version example of it, but you can get into the different data collection points, what's being reported to who, so you can help build your reports. So at any step along the way, I mean, this is time. This swim lane is really in time. So this is the beginning of the process. This is the end of the process. And as you work through time, going from left to right, there's going to be key things you're looking at different steps along the way. So you can build your reporting based on a time perspective of or in this case, an order process, and a manufacturing process. What are the key reports at any given step of that process that's going to give you the key things you're looking for? So,
okay. Because that's similar to what I do. I do the same type of flow
yeah,
charts so that we've
yeah,
documented what their current process
yeah.
is. But now this is where the real work comes in. When is it a process problem versus a software problem?
Yeah.
And, what do you see as you look through their process, and what are some things you're looking at to determine if it's a process problem versus a software problem?
Yeah. Process problems typically are where you have a lot of repeated things going on, where maybe you're skipping steps, or you're repeating data entry at different places, and you have inefficiencies that are built in, as you work through your process. So as opposed to, I'm waiting for something to pull up here to give you a little more direct examples, but um, data entry, multiple data entries, down.
Well, that's coming up. I know some of the things that I look at. I mean,
Yeah.
if it's more process, people doing the same work, but they're doing it
Hmm.
a different way.
Yeah.
Uh, like you talked about before, ownership really isn't clear, so it's kind of
Yeah.
unclear. There's workarounds, and then reporting varies because of inputs are vary.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
So
you get into waiting between steps. You have gaps in your process flow, excessive hands-offs, unclear ownership of who's responsible for what. Bottlenecks where things get, if you don't have the process flow designed well, you get bottlenecks where things get hung up, and now people are waiting for this to happen, kind of stuff. Um, and poor sequencing of steps, can be a process related issue. Um, and then layout, material movement, like I talked about, looking at how the process, how the physical material is moving through your facility or whatever. Those kind of things can really be more process related.
and then on the software side, I see, maybe there's duplicate entry, or they're using spreadsheets, right? So if they have a software system but they're still reliant on spreadsheet,
Yeah.
that's always a red flag.
Yeah, like as you say, if their older software system doesn't have the reporting capability of what they need, they'll rely on spreadsheets to get the stuff in front of them that they want. They're walking around with paper orders and handing those off rather than have something flow through a electronic version, where now you have multiple versions of something that are out on the shop floor, as opposed to a centralized place where everyone can get, if there's an update to an order, for example, and the original order went out, and it's a piece of paper that they're carrying through with the ticket, and now the customer's called in a change, and now you've printed out a new ticket. Now you got two tickets out on the floor, as opposed to a centralized place in the software where they're seeing that change in real time, and they can make adjustments accordingly rather than have chase it down on the floor. Um, Quality traceability is a huge software opportunity. How are you collecting your quality data? How are you tracking it? Traceability of lots, that kind of a thing. If you do have a customer issue, having that traceability is key. So there's a lot of software capability there as well.
What happens when you get the response that, um, even though there's something that's inefficient, but you have someone that's been doing it for a long time and they're just comfortable with that. Like, how do you uh, attack
Well,
that?
yeah, yeah, that's a challenge. I mean, people are comfortable with, they accept the status quo as comfort. And one of my big challenges, you probably see the same thing. My biggest competitor is the status quo as a consultant, trying to find these ways to optimize. But you have to kind of trigger it into, or compare it to, yeah, that's how you do it. That's what you're comfortable with. But typically, when you have those kind of inefficient steps, there are pain points that are associated with it, and you have to kind of drill into those pain points a little bit. And wouldn't it be nice if we took this pain away here and there and do it as a enhancement, not a wholesale change. So build on, you got to build on what they're comfortable with, but then find the opportunities to make it better, rather than saying, "Oh, we got to change it," and then that's where they kind of they put their hands up, saying, "Oh, I'm uncomfortable with that." Whereas you're more building on what they're doing, building on that comfort that they have, and now saying, "Well, wouldn't it be nice if you know by doing it this way, a slight shift from what you're doing or entering the data in a different way, all of a sudden you get the answer. You don't have to fight for the information you're looking for. It's handed to you in a nice report, and then you can make the proper decision. So you have to kind of work with them, understanding where that comfort level comes from, but then finding those opportunities, those nuggets of benefit that again and that's a different kind of aha moment. They're like, oh wow, that's convenient. Wouldn't that be nice, if I could do that? And even having the conversation, again, you got to be careful with it, because careful what you wish for, kind of a thing. Like, if it could be better, what would you want? you know because sometimes you can't provide what they want. But again, kind of that uh, understanding this the comfort of the status quo, but then there is a better state out there, a better way of doing things, a more efficient way of doing things, uh, that you have to tap into.
Yeah, and a lot of times they don't understand that their comfort level is potentially a cog in the wheel of everybody around them, right?
Right, right.
It could be slowing up the process to the next person down the line, or it
Yeah.
may not be giving the person down the line enough information that they really need. But yes, they
Hmm.
have their spreadsheet, they're comfortable with it. But how
Yeah.
do you now disseminate that information to the next person so that
Right.
they can take actions on it? So what
Right.
you know, I I, I typically do the five whys. I don't know if you ever
Hmm.
try that. You just keep
Yep.
asking why,
Yep.
because and try to get to the root cause of the
Yeah.
problem. Because the answer of just because I've always done it is not a
No.
good answer. Like they have
And
to understand why they're doing things and
yeah.
potentially how it's impacting the rest of the flow.
Right. And they need to understand how that impacts the bigger picture of the business as well. I mean, you have to wrap these conversations into the goals of the company as well, whether it's just, profit goals. They want, do they have a scalable, they want to scale to a larger size. They want to bring in different product lines. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways to grow and expand a business. And sometimes these uh, little manual ways of doing things, or these comfortable ways of doing things, are encumbering that growth. And you got to find a way to unshackle those things to be able to develop that growth. And um, the process you have, the things you're doing that are comfortable aren't scalable. You can't if you're manually doing something or pulling all of a sudden you need a double capacity. Now it's physically impossible, because you've handcuffed yourself to this manual process, or this comfortable process. Now if the company needs to scale or something needs to change, um, you're incapable of going to that next level. And that could, that's where you have to understand the bigger picture as well. What's the goal of the company? What you're trying to do, and how their role impacts that goal. Because then they can see the benefit of the change, and how it's going to change their day-to-day operation as well.
So what are some things you would recommend to a company that they're kind of in this boat where the software is not producing what they're looking for? Uh, so they're thinking it is a software problem.
Hmm.
Uh, Obviously, reaching out to yourself or someone like me would be beneficial, but for whatever reason, maybe they don't want to go that route. What is something that you think they could do uh, to kind of get to that decision, whether it's a process problem or a software problem? Like, what are things they
Um,
could do before they reach out to anyone.
Well, the important thing is to have a good, solid internal conversation with your key management, or and what are you trying to accomplish here? Is really have that real conversation. Is what's the goal of what we're trying to do? Are we trying to, go after our issues that we have with our budget? We're constantly falling short of this budget point or that budget point, or we want to, I worked for one company where the goal was that we want to, we're having trouble attracting good employees because this is the pay rate that we offer. We want to offer a higher pay rate to get better potential employees, but we have to be able to afford that price change, or that salary change. So how do we get there? And some of that was some of, to get to that, that chicken and the egg kind of conversation, is we gotta become more efficient, so then we can increase the wages, and then we can attract more people, and then we can grow, and but it kind of all cycles on itself. But to have those real conversations of what are your key reasons for wanting to do this, and then that leads into what are we going to do. But the why, you got to do the why. I mean, your five whys, like you said. Why, in this scenario, the whys is why are we proposing this change? Is it because we want to grow? Is it because we're falling short on cash flow? Is it because we're not hiring the right kind of people, or we have a lot of turnover of people because people aren't understanding what we're doing and they're leaving, and or whatever? Or do we have a product or a process that is now outdated compared to the competition? Do we have, whatever segment or whatever sector you're in, do you have competitors now who are offering a better product, and you need to step up your game? How do you get there to be more competitive? You're losing market share or whatever. So there's a lot of different reasons for this kind of thing. But you have to have those real in-depth conversations of why are we proposing this change, and what are the things we want to achieve from it. And that comes into the whole cost analysis, the ROI of doing a project like this. If this is the goal we're trying to meet, it's going to cost us X to get there. Will this ultimately pay for itself or not?
Uh, Perfect. So I'm just gonna just share my screen again
Yeah,
just to review some of these items.
yeah,
Um, so we kind of talked about what you do before you start shopping for software. You want to clarify the current workflow, find bottlenecks and rework, define what the business needs are, like you're
yep,
talking about,
agreed.
and then, evaluate tools against reality.
Yeah, because you want,
Um,
you're making an investment in this software. You want to make sure that you're getting what you're paying for. Because too much, I've seen it as well. You've probably seen it as well, where they jump the gun. They go to step they go to step four first, buy the software, and now you're trying to jam your process into, the software that you purchased that you didn't spec out properly. It had all kinds of great stuff, but it wasn't necessarily a good fit, and you didn't realize that until it was too late. And now there's pressure to, well, we bought this thing, we may as well use it. And now you're transforming your process to fit the purchase of the software, and that's not necessarily the way you want to go. You want to do it the other way around.
okay, so, as you go through this process, what does success look like for a client that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, these are some really good points. Faster cycle times, fewer stalled approvals, less rework. You get into yield loss. And again, this is when you get back to we talked earlier about reporting. Um, what does success look like as well? What are you measuring, and how are you tracking it? What were your goals that you set up initially, that we're going to reduce yield by X%, or we're going to improve cycle time by so many minutes per hour, minutes per whatever. And so the reporting, like your second bullet there, is critical. And so you can see, so you can see how you're actually performing compared to what you were getting before. Um, so, success looks like that you're meeting those goals that you've established, and you're identifying the changes that you wanted to make, and then you can track your performance against that, and then that leads again to your ROI to clarify that you've this money you've spent, this thing has paid for itself, and you're getting the benefits you're looking for.
For me, the key thing, all those things are great, and it definitely helps with when I do implementations.
Hmm.
But that bottom bullet, the lower implementation risk. So
Yeah.
I've I've understand what their current state is, so I
Yep.
understand what they're currently doing today.
Hmm.
Um, we work through and find out if it's a process thing or if it's a software thing, right?
Yep.
And we determine what the future state would look like. What are the requirements that you need for an application so we
Right.
can find the right application that meets those needs. But as we do that process, that's going to make the implementation a lot easier because we've
Absolutely.
documented the issues, we found solutions to those issues. So we're not trying to force something into an application that doesn't work.
Right.
So
And keep
going
in
through this
mind,
process definitely helps in the implementation.
yeah, and keep in mind, when you talk implementation, you know, businesses or manufacturing or whatever don't have the luxury of saying, okay, we get to stop everything and then make this implementation and then then start up again. You're still producing through the implementation. I mean, you're completing orders, your operation is running as you make this implementation. So you want to make sure that it's going to go as smoothly as possible with the least amount of risk, because you're continuing to do business throughout that whole process. You're making products, you're still pushing out orders or whatever. um, and if you, like you say, if you had a high risk of implementation problems because you didn't spec it out properly, you're going to have work stoppages, you're going to have missed orders, you're going to have missed shipments, that you could all of a sudden get yourself into trouble with your clients saying, oh, they put in this, how many times have we heard this now? Oh, we just put in a new system, sorry, and we're still working out the kinks. And a little bit is people will put up with, but if it happens a lot and you're missing key orders because you didn't spec this thing out properly and now you're having implementation problems, they're going to go to your competitor.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's some real risk there just as you go through the process if you haven't thought it out ahead of time well.
So as we wrap up here, it's been a great conversation. I think the bottom line here is, you know, before they are looking at software, uh, or if they know that their processes are not working correctly, is to if they don't have the resources internally to do this, reach out for help. Uh,
Yeah, agreed.
you know, Contacting you to go through their process, make sure they understand their process. And sometimes, working with someone like you can come up with a resolution to their process problems.
Yeah.
That means maybe they don't need software. Their process needs to be.
Well, or they identify a different need for the software. I mean, again, we get into reporting. AI now is creating all kinds of new possibilities to help with optimization, but you got to have that gut check of your process first, and really understanding and clarifying what you're looking for, what you're trying to do, and like you pointed out earlier, those aha moments, where if you don't take a good look at your process before you do any kind of purchase like this, you're going to run into things that you weren't ready for, without having the process look up front. So it's critical to just do a good gut check. I mean, again, even if you're like, oh, we're running fine, we don't really have any problems, but we want to grow. It's like, well, there's more problems than you realize because you've lived with them, you've accepted them, you become used to the pain, you come, deaf to the noise. You've accepted it, but you don't necessarily want to apply that into the new software. You don't want to build those same issues into a new program. So sometimes, again, that's where the name came from. Extra set of eyes is, have that extra set of eyes where you're looking at things with a fresh perspective, asking those whys, asking those questions, to really just and you may at the end of it say pat yourself on the back saying, yeah, we're doing okay. But now with the software we can do even better. But more likely you're going to say, well, we're doing okay, but we've identified this, and that we need to fix, and now we can apply the software, and that benefit's going to go even more. So,
Yeah, and I love the name because, having, like you said, you're comfortable doing what you're doing and it seems like everything's working, but if you have a third person come in and observe, they can, they don't know your process, but they may
yeah,
understand how processes work and they can
hmm
identify where
yeah,
the issues are, where
and
you think everything is fine.
yeah, well, and or because you haven't looked at other processes. You know your process, and this step that you do that's awkward to me is comfortable to you because you don't know that it's actually awkward compared to what other people do.
Yeah.
You may realize that there's a better way that you just didn't know was there before. Um, whether it's a physical attribute of your process, or a software attribute saying, if we just had this kind of reporting or just had this kind of data analysis or this kind of data input, all of a sudden the time you're wasting chasing your tail goes away, and now you can focus on other things. You can enhance your employees to do more or better things, rather than spinning their wheels, wasting time doing manual stuff that's not necessary anymore with the technology. I mean, again, you can look back through time and how things have changed, technology wise. Just a perfect example is driving your car. Before the invention of cruise control, you're constantly watching your speed and doing this, and now you have the technology, the software to put on cruise control, and you can focus on other things rather than controlling your speed. So that's again a
Yeah.
simple example, but but it's that kind of thing. I mean, what are the cruise control examples in your process where that you can find?
Yeah. So a lot of just to add on to that analogy that the people are in on cruise control and they're really not focusing on what's around them that
Hmm.
could be broken. But
Yeah,
Paul, thanks for your time today.
yeah. No, thank
Uh,
you.
we'll make sure people have a way to contact you if they looking for process improvement, quality improvement, and I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, no, great, David. This has been a great conversation, and yeah, people need to be able to reach out to both of us, to help them get where they want to go.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for your time today.
All right, you bet.